Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. Today I'm joined by Amit, City of Mist RPG. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's been literally years since we've talked and
I
did this,
know.
so we're gonna do it again. And
Yeah.
it's funny when you first got on, you're like, "Should we talk about things we talked about before?" I'm like, "I have no idea what we talked about before." If you remember, you got a way better memory than I do.
No. I had to rewatch it last night to see what the hell was I saying 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. That'll do it. As always, there's links down in the description to check out City of Mist. In all fairness, I have to admit I have not played yet. I've heard nothing but good things about City of Mist from friends of mine. But I guess we were kind of
Cool.
talking beforehand, and it's just like there are so many good games out there, and just not enough time.
Yes. It's a serious problem. But yeah, City of Mist has spent this time growing and our community is growing. So if you were looking to play, you'll have a lot more people to play with now than you did before, that's for sure.
What year did City of Mist come out?
The first Kickstarter was in 2016, and the first core book came out late 2017.
So okay,
Yeah.
so
So
2016. So we're going on like 5 years now.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so have you met your 5 year goals? Did was this on
Good
your bingo card?
question. Yeah, that's a good. Probably not. Probably not. I think I was quite naive going into it, so I thought
Yeah.
maybe I'll be on the moon by now. But I'm really, really happy with, and I think it's just great to see the community and to get the feedback and really just to see people enjoy the game. And of course, we have a lot of plans for the future, but it's slower than you think it is when you get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Before
good.
the end times, were you able to make it to conventions to kind of show off City of Mist? I know when we did this the first time, you were in Israel, and now you're here in the States.
Yeah. So I did. I went to Gen Con a couple of times. We won a couple of Ennies, and it was good. It was good times. I missed that. I would love to do it again.
Yeah.
Maybe this year, later this year or next year. But yeah, recently it's been all online.
So what are I guess for folks that aren't familiar with City of Mist, what can they expect from it?
So City of Mist is it's a lot of the times it's framed like a superhero game, but actually what it is, it's a modern fantasy game. You play individuals in a normal city, modern day city that have the powers of legends. So you can obviously there are pre-made characters, but you can play the Snow Queen, who is a socialite, high-flying socialite in the circle of the city, or you can play a construction worker who's has Thor, the powers of Thor, or has actually the mythos, as we call it. Every character has a mythos or a legend inside them. So it's really about playing modern day characters. It's a modern fantasy game. Modern day characters with the powers of your favorite legends, myths, and literary characters. That's basically the short of it. And it's kind of an investigative game. In the city, there is this force called the Mist that hides the presence of legendary powers. So everybody kind of like lives life as if these things didn't exist, except for the people with these powers. So you have heroes and villains, and mostly people with gray morality running around with these powers behind the scenes and kind of moving and shaking the entire city, and you're one of them. And every legend wants to tell its story and influence the whole city, and you're kind of trying to discover who's behind what is going on in the city, what kind of legend is behind it, who's the villain this time, and so on.
So you kind of mentioned it's like an investigative game, but as a player, like what do you do in the game?
So as a player, there's a couple of things. I mean, there are there is definitely the investigative aspect. So what you do a lot of the times is you get clues, this resource called clues, and you spend it by asking questions and getting clues for them, and that kind of drives the story forward. So you don't necessarily need to be a master investigator in order to play this game. It's kind of the mechanics are kind of creating this nice flow of unraveling new leads. And of course, there's a lot of interaction. It could be combat, it could be social conflict, it could be a magical conflict between you and your crew and some of these legendary characters, or sometimes some of the mundane characters in the city. So like police, or just like a totally random regular gang that you run into because you kind of like invaded in their turf. So I think, if you think about modern fantasy stuff like or more down to earth, gritty Marvel stuff like Daredevil, Jessica Jones. That's one example. Fables, the Wolf Among Us. That's another example. Which kind of combine a little bit of investigation, but also some serious showdowns and you know clobbering each other with magical powers.
What is like the driving force to get a group of these like legendary or mythological beings together in the game?
So in session 0, the game can have many different. You can set it in different times, like true noir in the 30s, or neon noir in the 80s, or like something more modern. So you can really have a very wide range of games. But and the same goes for your crew. Your crew could be a team of professionals, like mercenaries that do things. You could be like an investigative group, like in the starter set. Probably going to talk about it a little later. You can be just like a Scooby Gang, and so on and so forth. So we give different examples of the kinds of crews that you can play, and that really gives the game its tone. Like, we've had there's even like company man style campaign where everyone's working for an organization and have to kind of answer the company and stuff like that.
So there's quick start rules too on the website that people can download.
Yes, we have a quick start that's free. You can download it with a couple of characters. And the basic rules, and there are two cases that you can, two ready-made cases you can just dive into. So if you just want to sample it, yeah, and basically everything you need to get into it. City of Mist is it's not only a narrative game at its core, it's also quite friendly for new players because it's based on words and not on numbers. So a lot of the calculations and the adding and the subtracting or multiplying that you have in other games just isn't there. You basically have a bunch of tags or words that define you, and whenever these tags are applicable, they just give you, each tag gives you a +1 for your roll. So that's basically a very straightforward mechanic. Of course, at the same time, there's a lot of depth to it as well, but the core mechanic is quite simple. So even people who haven't played role-playing games before get into it pretty quickly.
So what was the impetus or inspiration for you when you came up with this game?
Really, I was trying to create a superheroes campaign where everybody has magic as their origin, like, for example, Scarlet Witch, stuff like that, or Doctor Strange. But the more I got into it, the more I realized, I mean, I love legends, I love mythologies, I love literary works and these characters, and I love the idea of these characters being kind of retold in a modern way. So as soon as I started locking in on that specific idea, that was it. I was just like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. I want to do Excalibur as this rich lady. I want to do Job from the Bible as this, beat up priest. I want to do whatever. I mean, we have so many characters now. There's like hundreds of mythoi in the book, so it's just really cool to interpret these characters.
What is the core mechanics for the game?
So yeah, like I said, the core mechanics is you have a certain amount of tags. Every character starts with technically 12 tags. Maybe I can whip up something. Here we go. So for example, this character Baku, you have 4 themes, which are, you can also get these in the starter set or the quick start. You have 4 themes, and each theme has 3 power tags. So you end up with 12 power tags. And whenever you want to do anything in the game, each one of those tags, if it's applicable and helpful to what you're doing, gives you a +1. So, of course, your tags are a mix of like investigative qualities, weapons that you have, resources, powers, abilities, and it becomes super, super flexible because let's say, for example, that Baku has a tag called Meld into the Dark. So he can use Meld into the Dark if he's sneaking behind someone. He can use Melt into the Dark if he's just trying to like eavesdrop on someone. You don't have to have each and every ability like broken out. You just broken down. You just have this tag, and it gives you +1 to any action that is that is relevant for the situation.
So is it a D20 system, D6 pool?
Yeah, so it's the core is kind of sort of based on Apocalypse World. So it's
Yeah.
like Dungeon World, Monster Week, Monster Heart, Monster of the Week, Masks. You roll 2d6 and you add whatever modifier you get from your tags. And then if it's 6 or less, it's a miss, which means that the GM or the MC gets to do something back to you. And then if it's 7 to 9, it's a complication. And if it's 10 or more, it's a big success. So the game does use 8 core moves, which are basically the core actions that you can do in this kind of a noir, superpowered noir setting. Things like hit them with all you've got, sneak around, investigate, convince, things like that. And those core moves, like I said, you roll 2d6 and you add those modifiers that you get from the tags.
Man, PBA has spawned so many games.
It has great games, I have to say.
Uh,
I think what I like about it is it's just really it's very I think I've said this before, it's very story driven. It really promotes a narrative game where we tell a story, we explore what's happening, and we are spending actually the least amount of time calculating what's happening, which is what I like. City of Mist is very cinematic. It's all about making it feel like a modern fantasy movie or TV show.
have you been surprised in ways that people have come back to you and told stories of how they're using your game that maybe you weren't anticipating?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories like that. Some of them are just like mechanical things, like people have started. I always thought, okay, there are defensive tags, there are offensive tags, there are investigative tags, but then people started coming up because tags are open-ended, started coming up with interesting applications like tags that offset conditions, and stuff like that. So that was pretty cool to see the mechanics being used in different ways. But it's also really beautiful to just go into our Facebook group or Discord or Reddit and subreddit and just kind of listen to people talk about their campaigns. And I mean, people go to town with it. They create very dramatic and cinematic experiences for their players, which is cool. And every now and then someone will share this crime board that they've created, or this cosplay, or a map of the city that they've created, which is amazing.
Do you get much time to play nowadays?
I don't. No, I actually don't. Ever since I stopped, I think playtesting some of our books, it's just been mostly work. So unfortunately, I don't. But every now and then, I make a point of running a game. I ran a game recently for a show called +1 XP, and I play City of Mist, and it's always kind of bringing me back to things to improve and how to teach others how to play a game. But there's a lot of other games that I love and that I don't really get the chance to play anymore.
It's difficult when you're running a company. Like, I feel like a lot of us go into this and they're like, oh well, if I make this business around this thing I like, I'll get lots of time to do it, and it doesn't always work that way.
Nope. Yeah, I agree. For me, it's the same. It's then it becomes a business and it has its needs. And I mean, it was challenging enough over the past few years to juggle managing the business and writing the game. I'm not even
Yeah.
talking about playing the game. These two things were very, very time consuming, and doing both of them together was pretty challenging. So yeah, but it's still a lot of fun. I mean, I wouldn't really change anything. I'd like to play more, but
What is in the starter set?
so the quick start rules that we have on the site is like really the basic stuff. What we realized later is that we can create this experience in a box that people can get, and it will be almost like just jump right in there with your friends. And I kind of wanted to create it as a choose your own adventure kind of thing, with little bits that you read as you're playing, rather than just going over the whole book. And you just like read it as you're playing, and you're learning the rules as you're playing. So this was released in 2020. So I guess last year. It's called the City of Mist Starter Box, the All Seeing Eye Investigation. And what you get in it is you get that book for the players, which is this one, where you have something like 12 what we call exhibits. And exhibits are like little paragraphs that you can read, and they just pretty much walk you through learning the game. So this one's a little longer because it explains the character sheet. But then a little later, you start playing the game. You maybe read 2 or 3 exhibits, then you start playing the game. And as the GM goes through the case, really the adventure, they will see, this is the time to teach this is the time to learn this, and you will just like kind of make a little stop, learn something new, and keep going. So yeah, it's kind of a boxed experience. You also get 5 characters, like Baku that I showed earlier. So it's a poster on one side, and then your character sheet on the other. And these characters are totally optimized for new players. You have all the rules inside the folio, and that's it. I mean, this is pretty much all the rules, so it's that simple. And you have your character at the bottom. You have suggestions for how to combine your tags for each character. So this whole thing is pretty well oriented to to beginners. And,
Have you considered branching out into other media?
yeah, definitely. We're definitely exploring that. I mean, this box in a way is kind of like a step towards board games in a way,
Uh,
because it has maps, it has tokens. I'll just show you a couple of things here. So you get tokens for all the characters. You get different maps of different locations in the cases. So yeah, we're kind of branching into, in a way, this is kind of trying to I don't know what you can see there, but there's different locations. And yeah, you kind of we're trying to reach out, I think, to all those people out there who would like to play but role-playing games, but are a little bit afraid maybe of role-playing games. I mean, we did have an article recently that City of Mist is for people who are afraid to play Dungeons and Dragons.
yeah.
People say, those friends that are like, they just look at all those numbers. I have to say that traditional role-playing games character sheets are not very inviting.
No, they can be
It's like-
extremely intimidating.
It's like, yeah, come play with me. I have a sheet full of math and
Yeah.
that you can read. This person is running as so I mean, if you're lucky, someone dragged you into it. But if you're not, then maybe it's time to create something a little bit more enticing. And I think that's what we were going for with this box.
Also, the PBA systems are really nice in the sense that it's not just pass fail. It's one of the things I like about that system.
Yeah. It's always like there's always a something happening. There's always a development.
Yeah.
And there's no silent fail. If you fail, the MC is gonna, or as it's called in these systems, is gonna hit you with something. It's not just gonna be So the story is very dynamic. It looks less like a video game, which is great for some types of gaming, and a lot of people also work around it and do homebrew for 5e. But if you kind of just take the pure game, it's kind of like, okay, here from a mechanical standpoint, it gets a little like um, repetitive in terms of the things you can do. So I think a lot of people add the narrative to it, which is great. And
Has any of your pre-gens come out as the favorite?
Good question. I think everybody has different favorites. I think Scarlet is one of our biggest favorites. I mean, you can see all the characters on the site, not the
Yeah.
character sheets, but the we have like this wiki of all the characters. I think Scarlet, which is it's actually a backer created this character as a part of one of our tiers where people could create a character. So that's Little Red Riding Hood's version,
Okay.
our version of Little Red. So that's a popular one. And another popular one is Baby New, who is a getaway driver based on the Baby New Year legend. So
Okay.
every year he's born again on January 1st, and he ages throughout the year and becomes an old man on December 31st. So it creates problems. And but he could be a very young or a very old getaway driver to deal with. So
When are we going to see the City of Mist comic book? Yeah, it looks like it would lend
yeah,
itself very well to that. If people still
yeah.
read
So
comics.
I think they do. Yeah, I think comics is still a thing. I think that's. I mean, I definitely want to do it this year. This is one of my next projects. After we're releasing two books that have been in the works for a long time. One of them is an expansion called Shadows and Showdowns, and the other one is uh, like a set of 10 adventures, campaign book, story arc book, as we call it, called Knights of Paintown.
Mhm.
And that has been a long time in the making, juggling with the company, with everything. So now that that's all out of the way, I think that, a comic book is really, um, it's really asking for it, begging for it. And we also have little comic books inside our books. So we have little comic strips inside of books that kind of showcase different events. I loved it in Exalted. Have you ever opened an Exalted book?
I have not.
So they're awesome. They have every chapter starts with one of these things, and it really gets you to get into the world of the universe, really. So I loved it. So I kind of said, okay, I'm definitely doing this for City of Mist,
Some inspiration there.
and
So
and people love it too. So.
so what is the overarching kind of like I want to say theme, but like is like you just mentioned the campaign setting. Was that the intent from the very beginning? Like, here's this world, here's kind of the things that are in it, here are the things that you kind of play with, or was it a bunch of pieces that you send out into the world and different groups would organize them the way they want?
Yeah, there's definitely City of Mist is a very customizable game, and it kind of sets you and your group to create at least some elements of the world that you're playing in. I mean, even the choice what kind of crew you're playing and the time of the century that you're playing or whatnot, the year, I guess. And so, yeah, you do a lot of adaptations. But we did, as we progressed, started realizing, yes, there is such a thing as the published City of Mist universe, and we're building it out, and people are using it quite a lot. So we try to keep this tension between leaving things very much open for the players and the MC, and giving more materials, creating more materials in the published world. So the universe now with these two books has become immensely rich. You can really explore it for several campaigns without even exhausting everything that's there. So I think it's good. It's better maybe for people who are more traditional or campaign oriented players that are looking to really dive in and sink their teeth, and they don't want this game that's kind of like two books and that's it.
So Melanie says, I love the City of Mist, and I'd love to hear you talk about the Iceberg model for creating storylines.
Sure. So yeah, we it's not a new idea. We kind of adapted it to City of Mist. It's because people are kind of wary of creating investigative storylines. What we did is really create a guide for it. And the whole thing is built around the shape of an iceberg, where the bottom of an iceberg is really the big baddie that's kind of looming, not really looming, but hidden in the mist. And the top of the iceberg is the first, kind of clues that your characters are going to start revealing about it. So let's say, we can take, for example, what kind of character? What's your favorite legend?
We'll just go with an easy one and go with the legend of King Arthur.
Yeah, so let's say King Arthur is some kind of a villain in the city, and he's got plans for taking over Camelot or something like that. But and he has his minions, and they're like at the top of the iceberg. So in the beginning, your characters are just going to investigate something really casual, like people, a biker gang that are riding on, obviously riding on some off-road motorcycles, and they wear like trash can shields and baseball bats for swords, and these are the Knights of the Round Table, and you kind of engage them. But as you were kind of exploring more and more, you're finding their leader, and who's maybe kind of a mid-level villain, and you're going down and down, further down the iceberg, and then eventually you're going to get into Arthur. But the mist makes it that you're not instantly going to the top or the bottom of the iceberg. You have to kind of investigate and unravel who sent these guys, why are they here. So basically every MC, every GM can use this model to create their own little villain operation based on it. That's the concept behind it.
That makes sense, and that's super useful, especially for players that maybe aren't used to playing games that aren't Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like Dungeons and Dragons kind of has a way of funneling players through a story that's easy for a new GM to kind of understand. And when you get into a game that's like superheroes, or maybe in the future, it seems like there's so many choices are limitless and can be a little overwhelming for a GM.
Yeah, I agree. The problem is that these stories, these cinematic stories, like you said, they're not funneled. There isn't like a dungeon where they can explore and in advance what they're going to find in each room. So what we actually did with the Iceberg model, I'm going to show the starter box Iceberg model. Spoilers, so I mean it's not really spoilers, but what I want to show here is that each one of these points on the iceberg that you can see here is actually a location. And it's almost like you create a story dungeon. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And your players are kind of exploring the rooms. Each room is a location. And eventually their goal is to get to the most, deepest room in the dungeon, so to speak. But it's all a story. So these are like locations these could be the rooms could be locations, and we arrange them on the iceberg in a way that's how close are these locations to the ultimate truth. So it's really like running a dungeon, but it's a narrative dungeon in a way.
Yeah. I've absolutely done that. I mean, when I got away from writing, my material more traditionally as a GM, there was a time when I basically did just that. Like what you had there was like flow charts, right? Essentially. And it's just like, do you go to this thing? And, there might be several choices off of that to kind of branch out. Which is super helpful.
Yeah. So it's just, all you have to do is just look at your flow chart and you know where your characters are and how deep they are and how close they are, or where else they can go from here. And it makes it easier, because like you said, it can be quite daunting to run a narrative cinematic experience like that.
And you just don't know where your players are going to go, what they're going to do, and figuring out because you can always kind of funnel them, right? No matter what it is, it's just less, it might not be as obvious as it is with a D&D style game where it's like, oh, here's the dungeon. You have to figure out what your dungeon looks like in whatever system you're playing.
Totally, yeah. It's the same. It's the same thing, and I think there are other tools that are built into City of Mist, like the clue system. Allows the GM to either give a hint, like give a detail, or give the full answer to whenever a player asks them. So the players can ask whatever they want to know, like who's the killer, and the GM can say, okay, the killer is Sam, because we're at this point where I want them to already get to the killer.
Yeah.
Or the GM can say, well, you don't know who the killer is, but they left a watch. They left a broken watch in the crime scene. So you can, even using clues, you can pace it as an MC, and you have a lot of control. Yeah, I mean, it's really essential, I think, to help people create materials for your games and play your game, because it's so, people want to get creative. I think that's
Is the games, are they always centered around urban structures?
not necessarily. I mean, the what I showed you now, the iceberg for that's all over an entire neighborhood. So, and some of these places are outdoors, some of they're indoors. Some of these places on the maps aren't even locations. They're scenes that can happen all of a sudden. Like someone finds you and starts a fight with you, or you bump into a bunch of mobsters in a alleyway shakedown. So they're not necessarily closed locations. They could be like things that happen all of a sudden.
Well, I mean, is the premise of the game that it takes place in a city?
Yes, absolutely. It's
and
it's
is it
definitely
a
an urban game.
specific city?
Yeah, so that's the whole thing about City of Mist. It's the city. No one really knows what's outside the city. No one really cares what's outside the city. There is this kind of mental effect that makes people, I don't know how many, true urbanites, but that often happens to be the case. Like, they kind of, they're keeping their heads down and centered on what's happening in their city. And, there's everything that's happening in the world, but it's kind of like vague in the background. So, yeah, so in the canonical game, it's like this mysterious city and no one really knows what's outside. But no one really cares. But you can also adapt it, and I know a lot of people play in real world cities and stuff like that.
I feel like there's also the opposite effect if you live near a city, where your suburbanites do not like going into the city.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
It becomes this unknown void. Like my wife hates driving in Philadelphia.
Totally. It's based on a true story. The mist is totally real. I think
Yeah.
it's like people are totally distracted with what they know and what they what they're familiar with. And then I don't think I'm gonna go there.
Yeah. The mist is a metaphor for what we are comfortable with.
Exactly.
Nice. Do you have a favorite like pre-gen big bad that you use in the City of Mist?
Wow, that's a hard one. I mean, I kind of have a soft spot for one of the characters, Lily Chow. I mean, I love a lot of the characters. Where's Lily Chow? I love a lot of the characters, but this specific character I kind of like because it was the first real twist on a story that we did, and so she has this magical green giant, and she's based on a story called Iron Hans, which is basically Prince frees a big magical giant out of a cage, and this magical giant helps him out with his adventures. But Lily Chow is that prince, so she's this. She's kind of royalty because she's connected to a lot of the big villains of City of Mist, and she's just this random kid that's running around, running away from her parents, running around in the city. She doesn't know anything about the city, and she has a green magical giant that she can kind of summon up to, beat up anyone that's getting in her way, but also to kind of guide her. But this magical giant, what is it? Is it a part of her? Is it this source of wisdom? Does he know anything about the city? Probably not, but he knows, he knows the magical end of things. So I think it's just a really, really fun composite character to play. And I guess it would be my favorite, but I really like a lot of the characters that we've created for this.
And so in essence, she's just a runaway too. Well,
She's
not
a,
just, but yeah,
yeah, she is a runaway, absolutely.
nice. Um, so where do you see you guys going in the future with things for City of Mist?
So this is a big milestone for us. I mean, Knights of Paintdown, Shadows of Showdowns, it's a huge expansion for City of Mist, and we're going to continue to create more and more materials. We have a lot of district supplements that people like. We're thinking of releasing a book that's all districts. Um, um, but I think, yeah, I think some of the biggest things that I'm looking forward to next are one, a comic book probably, and two, a more generic system based on City of Mist that is kind of an evolution of City of Mist. So there are many things that I see over the years that could have been streamlined or improved, and there are many aspects of PBTA that really work for City of Mist, but kind of leaving behind and creating this maybe a purer form of just this tag-based mechanic. And I think I want to reach out to more people, you know. So I think that it's going to be a much more streamlined game, and you could play. A lot of people wanted to use this system for fantasy, for sci-fi, for cyberpunk. So I think that generic system. I want to say generic, but it's you know, this universal system is going to be
Yeah,
pretty cool to work on next.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of the Cypher System, right? Like
Yeah,
it was, you know, Numenera was the game, and then they stripped out all the Numenera to just create the Cypher System, and you know, play off of, like you said, a generic or universal system based
yeah.
off of those mechanics.
Yeah, and people love it. I mean, I know a lot of people that play Cypher System. People play Genesis, and you know, I think it's becoming a world of creators. You know, I don't
Yeah,
think that there is just. It's not like back in the day where there were like 5 creators. I don't know at the beginning of the way, and then 100 creators. It's a world of creators. Everybody's creating. Everybody's, you know, streaming. Everybody's doing that kind of stuff. So
it's like it's a side effect of the hobby, right? Because we're all designers to some degree or another, because it's just the nature of playing tabletop
yeah,
RPGs.
yeah,
You have to like design the game that you're going to run for your friends.
yeah.
Not, you know, not to say that there isn't a difference between professional designers and those that do it, you know, as a hobby. There's definitely a next level to it. So you kind of answered the question that I was going to ask, and that was, you know, do you ever think you'll leave the City of Mist to do something else? So the
Yeah.
universal version would be that.
Well, I don't think, yeah, that would be the universal version. We definitely will be doing other things. I actually don't think we'll ever leave City of Mist because it's kind of, you know, I know I see, and it's growing all the time. The community is growing. I don't think we'll ever really leave it. I hope that maybe we can even expand it into other forms of media. But at the same time, as far as mechanics go, yeah, I think maybe even if this universal system would be um, kind of an evolution of City of Mist, we might somewhere down the line do a second edition of City of Mist on that system. Um, Although it will be definitely very much backward compatible to
Yeah.
the products that you get now with City of Mist. So it's not like,
That's always the tough thing, right? Like as a designer, you make a thing and then you look back and go, "Oh, I would have done this different, or this could be better."
yeah,
And like the outward perception, I feel like from the consumer is like, "Oh, they just want to make more money." And where it's like, no, you're just a designer and you're trying to you create this perfect thing. And you know, when you look back, all you see is like all the imperfections and the places where you could have did better, and you want to put out the better version.
yeah. Although I can totally, I mean, I don't think, just to give you a clue, I don't think that the next version of City of Mist will even be a book. So I really want to take it to the next level with this new system, and we have some great ideas. I can't talk about everything right now, but it's really, I hope to really evolve the game, not just put out the same content again with the little tweaks for the mechanics. So we'll see. Let's see how it unfolds.
Yeah, I've definitely from talking to different creators and designers, I find there's like two camps, right? Like you said, some people will build a game and then they're done with that and they move on to the next game. And some people were like, well, I just want to keep creating in this one, this one area. Neither one of them are right or wrong. It's just like,
Oh,
some people are more of tinkerers, right? And they just like, okay, I want to experiment with new designs now and move on. And some people are like, no, like, I'm going to tell a story using these mechanics in this world, and I want to keep just expanding it out to like you said, to your own like cinematic universe.
yeah, totally. I think it just serves different functions in our community of role players. Some role players also like to move from one game to the next, and
Yeah.
maybe do I don't know, like five sessions, 6 sessions in one game. Great, we got the picture. We're moving on to the next. While I've always been a campaign player, so I'm all I always was kind of more connected to people who really wanted to sink their teeth and create long plots. And I think only now with the core books we kind of created a good baseline for people to create their own City of Mist campaigns. But now with these expansions, it's like you can just go in there and it's all there. You can use it. You have a full campaign you can play. You have a book full of expansions to all those things that we couldn't expand on in the core books. So yeah, that's more of my style. But obviously we have different companies and different products catering for different preferences of role
So,
players.
what is the gaming scene, the tabletop RPG scene like in Israel?
It's very active. It's quite an active scene. I was never a huge part of it because until I was kind of in the business, I wasn't
Yeah.
a really social and I mean networking kind of player. I was not a big conventions guy, so I don't know a lot about it, and I didn't know a lot about it until I started it. But it's very, very active. It's very creative, very productive people. There's a couple of creators who come from Israel. Um, yeah, I would say it's a very, very engaged community. There's a group within that community that is very into game theory. So if you want to look into Israeli game theory, they've published a couple of articles. Um, yeah, and
How did
a lot of our team members come from that community. So
you get started with RPGs?
Red Box Dungeons and Dragons. A friend got it, and we read about it in newspapers. It was by some kind of weird miracle. It was translated into Hebrew, and we
Yeah.
started playing. Yeah,
Was it readily available?
yeah, it was because some guy, I don't even remember the exact story, but some
Yeah.
guy went to Salt Lake City and got into TSR's um, offices and got the license to. They just liked him so much they gave him the license to translate it into Hebrew.
That's
So
awesome.
I would definitely not be here if it hadn't happened.
Because
But I moved away from it pretty quick. Like by 13, I was already playing like Hero System Champion and stuff like that. So
yeah. So there was a lot of games that are readily available.
not a lot. It would be mostly Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder more recently. I know Dungeon World is translated, Masks is translated, but Exalted was translated, but not that many. That's pretty much it. Like,
Yeah.
maybe a couple other games. And I mean, it's at some point I just started learning English and getting my books in English, and that opened up the world.
Well, I mean, that's a lot better than some places where I've talked to people where they've had to where it's almost like they're seeking out contraband in order to get the games, and like they can only get parts of the game and then had to like make it up or figure out how to
Yeah.
play without the whole system.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it's all related to business as well. Like 5e isn't officially translated into Hebrew. There's just like a what do you call it? Like a fan translation, but you can't get the license. It's too expensive.
Yeah.
You wouldn't make enough money from selling 5e to Israelis or to Hebrew speakers in the world to make it worth your time. So it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, it is like RPGs themselves, while growing, are not like a huge industry. You know, and then when you start going into other languages, yeah, you're just slicing it up even thinner. So it is tough.
But it's in the States and in the English speaking world, RPGs are exploding. I mean, I don't know if you've heard this thing that Hasbro has made more money in 2020 from Wizards of the Coast than all toys together. All of the toys in the world.
I did see that. I'm not sure that's not mostly just from Magic the Gathering, but
yeah, it could be mostly for Magic the Gathering. But I think that the 5e is exploding. If people can do a Kickstarter for $1-2 million just for a 5e supplement,
yeah, and we're seeing more and more of those. So like, it's definitely there's a market for it, which is good. And with the explosion of 5e, I always surmised there was going to be like a 3 to 5 year gap before it started like trickling out to other RPGs. And I think we're starting to get there, but you would know better than I. Do you feel like, you're starting to like reap the benefits of that popularity?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, we were recently featured in Forbes, so that was really cool as one of the recommended the starter box as one of the recommended starter boxes for 2021 with Pathfinder, with really big names. So we're really proud about that. And the other thing is that you have these influencers, like for example, RuneSmith just said recently in January that City of Mist is his favorite game, and he's like a 300,000 follower. Boom, suddenly we get this influx of people coming to City of Mist just because the exposure. So I think a lot of people are looking for new games. If you look at the recent Kickstarter by Free League for the second edition of
One Ring,
which is a great game, they crossed 2 million, I think. So that's, I think, unheard of for a role-playing game that isn't Dungeons and Dragons related. I mean, definitely the market is definitely growing, and you see more and more things based off role-playing games. I did not know. Did you know that The Expanse was based on a role-playing game?
Yes, like I was just talking about it the other day. Like,
that's crazy.
I think like the writers like converted like their GURPS game or something to the novels, which then the novels got converted to their own RPG and show it's crazy.
That's
also
crazy. So.
Like Tales of the Loop as well, like is another one.
Also, I don't know, is that based on the art or is that based on the role-playing game? I forget.
I think it's based on the art, which the role-playing is also based on the art as well. But all that kind of helps because you start poking around at Tales from the Loop, you're gonna find the show, the art, and eventually the RPG. So I'm just of the opinion that it's good for all of us, for the industry as a whole. Just bringing up people's awareness. I agree. The biggest problems that tabletop RPGs have had is like nobody really knows what they are, even with D&D being so mainstream. If you mention tabletop RPGs, people will probably just give you a blank look. If you mention specific ones that aren't D&D, they're not really going to know. But like when you say Dungeons and Dragons, we've at least gotten to the point where that invokes some kind of idea in probably like 8 out of 10 people of what that is, whether it's right or wrong. So
I've never said Dungeons and Dragons to people in the last couple of years, and they didn't know what I was talking about. You're trying to say, what do you do? What do you do for a living? I'm a game designer. Oh, you make video games? No, I make tabletop games. What's tabletop games? Like Monopoly? No, like Dungeons and Dragons. Oh. That's pretty much the conversation. So that's good. Yeah, it's growing. I think also Hollywood places, is starting to see this as a kind of a creativity generator that's creating a lot of really cool IPs, and you can see also the connection with RPG publishers constantly looking for established IPs to create games for, um, Alien, Terminator, all these recent
We're
releases. The One Ring is an IP. Uh, so
we're also
yeah.
getting really close to where we're going to see like a third generation of a family playing the game, right? Right,
Really?
like
A third? Well, yeah, I guess it's kids. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
like because I've run into some people that are closer to my age where they're introduced by their parents to the game, probably a bit younger than me. They're introduced to the parents of the game. Like I'm a parent that's introduced the games to my kids, and so like we're probably not very far off, right, from that. Ted's kids are much younger than mine,
Yeah.
um, and he's introduced his kids. So I feel like we're on the cusp where it's like it's become a generational thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely here. I see more and more role playing games for kids. I see, the core of role players is kind of more in the maybe 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
and then you have 50s, 60s, and then you have 20s and teenagers. So they have kids and they're about to have kids and they want their kids to be involved in that. And yeah, yeah. I mean,
And
there's definitely.
that's why we're seeing like celebrities that are coming out of the closet about being gamers now, right? And talking about it, which only makes sense because it's such a creative outlet for for people to then go on to the creative fields, which is
Totally.
then influencing right the different kinds of media that we're getting and having access to.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And then it's all, you have voice actors that then do critical role, and then that becomes a thing of its own. And so it's all connected, which
yeah,
is
like
amazing. It's
what
great for us.
one of my friends is Brian Colin from Creature Curators. He makes these like sculptures and stuff of monsters, and it's based around like his D&D world. And he'd actually gone out to LA to kind of like pitch, an animation studio and doing like a show and stuff. So like this stuff is really like creeping out into the world, the wider world. I also saw like Hasbro was talking about turning a bunch of their properties into RPGs. I don't know if they're going to do anything with it. I haven't heard any news about it, but if you Google it, it's out there. Like Transformers, GI Joe. Uh,
I mean, again, I think the world is moving towards a world of creators. I think more people, it's not just GMs, veteran GMs, more people that have never played role playing games want to take part in something creative.
yeah,
And that's why role playing games are so appealing. I see a lot of new players all the time. People in their 30s that just get up and say, "Oh, I really want to try role playing games." When 10, 15 years ago, who would do that? Who would get up and say, "I really want to try role playing games"? It's it was kind of this obscure hobby, and now it's something that you see people randomly cropping up and saying, "Yeah, I want to try it. I want to try it." So all these creatives are realizing that it's out there. It's a possibility. You can do that.
well, anecdotally, like I've been with my wife since '93, I believe, and it's only been the
Congratulations.
last couple years that she started playing RPGs.
Really? And how's she finding it now? I
She
mean,
enjoys it. Like she's in one of the D&D groups with me. She's played the Expanse with me. We're getting ready to run a Monster of the Week game that she's going to start playing. So for the past 20 plus years, she hasn't really showed any interest. But now all of a sudden, like she's getting more involved with it. She a couple years ago she tried with fourth edition with we tried doing like a family game with the kids, and
ooh,
they
fourth.
weren't really they weren't really ready to play yet. Um, and and then like my daughter is never going to be a gamer. I've come to grips with, but my son is very much into it. He's played in a bunch of our games. And then later on, my wife came back to it, and
Wow.
then now he plays in games with his own friends. Where they're playing stuff. So
That's
It's
cool. So there's hope. There's hope for my partner yet, you're saying.
yes, there is absolutely.
There's absolutely no interest in it right now. So
Yeah, well, my wife, for the most of the time that I've known her, she's just been nerd adjacent. So,
yeah,
but then I get I will say in the last couple years she's gotten more involved with it. She works in the business and helps us out with that as well now, and she's also started delving into the games and starting to play them. So there is always hope.
good. I'll
Uh,
keep the hope alive. So
but
this is why I'm creating something that's like, well, obviously it's not the reason for it, but I really feel like there is these adjacent, that adjacent crowd that really
mhm.
wants to get into it, and sometimes, right, many people would love it to be super technical, and that has a place and it's awesome, but sometimes I think some of them wouldn't want it that technical, and I'm trying to like tap into that, that system, that universal system that we're designing, that would maybe kind of be more inviting for people who don't want to get into something
It's
super.
super intimidating. Like my
Yeah,
wife is the kind of person that doesn't like to try new things because she doesn't like to feel like she doesn't know what she's doing. And there's a lot of people like that, right?
yeah,
And part of playing RPGs and getting into them is kind of embracing what you don't know until you do.
totally. Yeah, it's just like fake it till you make it. I
Yeah.
mean, first
Well,
time I remember when I read Champions. I mean, I was 13. My English was not good enough for Champions. Let me tell you, it's a 500-page
um,
technical book on how to. Have you ever played Hero System? It's like
I
so.
have not played Champions, and at 500 words, I don't think my English is good enough either. So
So it was just like, okay, what is elemental control? What does that mean? And it was like super technical, but eventually I figured it out. We just came up with an effect. It wasn't the right one. We played
yeah,
with it, and then I read it. I don't know, 3 years later, and I was like, oh, that's what we
yeah.
were supposed to do. But we had fun, so I guess you don't always have to understand what you're doing.
Well, that's the important thing, and also, you know, I started playing in the 80s. I would say, probably mid 80s. And back then, there wasn't other ways to learn the game. It was just like whoever introduced you to the game, that's where you're going to play it, and that's who you're going to
Yeah,
learn from, and you're going to read it. So for most of that time, we were all just making stuff up and messing it up, right? So
yeah,
until we
exactly.
figured it out, there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing at all.
Yeah. So is that your preferred genre, supers?
No, I was always into it. I wouldn't say it's my preferred one. I mean, I really like fantasy. Definitely in the universal system, the first thing we're going to tackle is some kind of fantasy. I really like
Yeah.
this kind of journey fantasy, I call it. Like, the quest, the real, like, go to the Mount Doom and cast the ring, but without knowing how it's all going to unfold.
Yeah.
So more I get, more of that kind of classic fantasy. Um, Personally, I love Star Wars. I'm crazy about Star Wars. So my favorite game in the last 5 years has been the Fantasy Flight Games one, which I think is excellent. Um, the new one, yeah. So, but I like supers too. So I've played a bit of supers, definitely.
Yeah, we've had some fun with the new Star Wars game. I like it, especially when you get less and less Jedi. I'm just a very anti Jedi.
It's kind of a problem when you have a party of like 5 Jedi. It looks like some High Republic game or something like that,
Yeah.
and it's not really authentic to the movies. But actually, what I've almost consistently done in these things is create. You know how the books are divided into Jedi, Rebel, and Scum, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I usually get like one of each, and that's more like Luke, Leia, and Han kind of combo, and it works well. Yeah, you don't
So
want one more than one Jedi mostly.
so not to interrupt you, but I think the stream just died, and I've never had this happen before.
It happens. It happened to me on my test last night.
An error occurred. Please try again later. What? So I don't know if it's still recording or whatever. I mean, we were right at the end anyway,
Yeah,
at
that's cool.
least. But wow, curse you, YouTube. You've boned me.
Let's see. Well, we weren't saying anything someone has never heard, anyone hasn't ever heard before. So
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
they'll survive.
All right. Well, I'm just going to hit the end button. And
Let's see.